Here we go. So we're running a little bit behind because Zoe had a lot of very interesting things to say there, but I will make sure that we end promptly so that my colleague Kanisha can start promptly. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the importance of benchmarking, which was a key theme that was coming through from this year's pay planning survey results. So we asked participants about the importance of a whole number of different factors when determining the outcome of their pay increase for 2021. And comparing this year's results to last year's results shows that influences have changed over the course of the pandemic. Obviously, the leading answer on influences on pay rises was affordability, as with last year, but benchmarking is really leapt up in importance. So when we asked people about their pay planning for 2021 in 2020, 52% cited that as an important factor, whereas this year, looking ahead to pay planning for 2022, 73% of employers citing it as an important factor. So that also reflects the fact that the economy is reopened and sped up, and that we can see labour market pressures are emerging in lots of different areas. And some of these are reflected in pay, hence an increased focus on pay. We've also seen an increase in the role recruitment and retention is playing on pay decisions, and that ticked up slightly from 59% to 61% this year. The survey also asked employers about what activities they are going to be undertaking in 2022, and benchmarking has leapt up. So there were 10 activities we asked about, so benchmarking pay, hiring extra staff, changing working hours, altering benefits provision, etc. And benchmarking pay levels came up as the top activity for 2022, and it's increased significantly from 87% saying they intend to conduct benchmarking in 2022 versus just 45% that said that they were going to undertake that activity this year from last year's survey. And our impression really is that this coming year is all going to be about pay in various ways. Whereas last year it tended to be around benefits. Lots of people were looking at sick pay, time off, holidays, location pay, things like that. This year it really seems to be that pay will be the dominant focus for the HR agenda. The survey also found that lots of employers creating new jobs in the last 12 months. So in fact, over half have created new jobs. A fifth of those said that they were created specifically in response to the pandemic. And we've seen growth in two key areas. The first one's probably not a surprise, so in the health, care and pharmaceuticals areas. But the second one is we've seen lots of growth in cyber, digital and IT jobs. And I've just put a chart there just to give you a bit of colour really, and they are real salary data figures from our benchmarking tool of salary levels for cyber security officer and cyber security manager, just for a little bit of flavour. But we have also seen there's been other job creation in the kind of strategic managerial space, where there's been new jobs created to help steer companies through the recovery and beyond. We've also seen recruitment and retention pressures, and I'm not going to talk about that at the moment because Ken is going to talk to you a little bit about that later. But much of what we've seen on the recruitment picture is also supported by the CIPD's latest labour market outlook, which found that the proportion of employers looking to recruit in the 3 months to September this year has actually increased to 69%. Okay, so our research is indicating that benchmarking looks set to be a key activity in 2022, but how might firms go about this? And the next few slides are focused on what I'd say are the main steps involved in any exercise, and I'm going to share some hints and tips from my experience of undertaking salary benchmarking for a wide variety of jobs at businesses across the economy. So really, this is just a summary of what I'm going to talk about. So there's 4 key steps. Identifying your roles that you're going to benchmark, identifying suitable job matches, deciding what market data you need, and then obviously comes the analysis and comparison stage. So on the first step, first of all, deciding what jobs you need to benchmark. So one of the key early steps in many of our commission projects involves working with a client to determine which jobs need to be benchmarked, particularly when they're looking on embarking a company-wide exercise. So most firms have a relatively large number of unique or individual posts or roles. And sometimes they come to us with the impression that every single role needs to be benchmarked. But we would typically suggest that not every single role needs to be covered because some roles might be very similar in scope, skills and responsibility. And so our approach here would be to identify the key benchmark roles in each area or function. So for example, in one area, let's say finance, you might decide to cover the junior position, the seasoned professional, the line manager, and the function head, and have those as the main anchor points for understanding the market for that function. You might even decide to take a sample of jobs within each grade across the company, reflecting all of the different divisions and functions you have. And you might take that from a grade, or if you use a hay level or some other job evaluation scheme. So you've got a representative population. In other areas, though, you might have real specialist jobs or jobs facing specific recruitment retention challenges. And here we'd suggest that you do benchmark all jobs in that particular specialism. Um, all we normally would say to businesses is you need to think about how much the more jobs you benchmark will give you more lines of data at the end, and you've got to make sense of that and help that evidence make you make decisions. So it's about making it a manageable exercise, but also understanding the results. Obviously, in a smaller exercise, if you're just benchmarking one or two jobs, if you're looking at a specific issue, for example, you're just looking at HGV drivers, that's obviously a lot easier. But it is definitely a consideration before you embark. Why are you doing the benchmarking and which jobs need to be covered? The next step is to decide what is the most appropriate comparator. So this helps you ensure you're making like for like comparisons. And there are a number of factors to think of. Well, sorry, for most jobs, this is relatively straightforward since they're found in most organisations, but you still need to be mindful of differences in scope and responsibility. So jobs such as, in this example, I've used a call centre supervisor. It's a fairly common job found in lots of parts of the economy. In this specific example, the client has already been able to establish that their call centre supervisor is equivalent to our level 5. And therefore the data in our database for customer service first tier supervisor at level 5 is a suitable match. So if you have already had your jobs evaluated, you need to think about how that levelling system reads across to the data source or survey that you're going to use. Most commercial bodies have looked at other job levelling sizing techniques and can give you guidance on that. If there isn't guidance, then you need to think about the job that you're benchmarking. Ask yourself, is it on the leadership team? Does it have direct reports? Is it responsible for managing budgets? And you can use information from your job descriptions, organisation charts to help you determine the most appropriate job level to identify the best match in the data source. So this example for the call centre supervisor is nice and straightforward. And it's probably relatively easy if you're doing something like a receptionist. But what happens when you're doing unique or specialist jobs? Here it can be difficult to identify suitable job matches, but it's not impossible. And here our approach in the past has been to go beyond the scope of the typical job sizing and to actually look in more detail at the job that you're benchmarking and identify the definitive and distinctive aspects of that job and seek those in other jobs. So it's more of a best match that you're looking for here. So we've done some work. We've done this sort of work quite a lot, and it might be that you identify that a particular job has a specific challenging work environment that you seek in other jobs, or a particular skills mix that you're looking to match, or it's about incident response. So it's those sort of criteria that you boil down the job you're looking at into key characteristics and you seek those in matches. Another way you can do benchmark is to go for kind of a blending approach. So if your job sits across two jobs, you can merge the data. So in this example that I've just put on the screen, you've got an administrator that has financial responsibilities. You've looked at the job and you've decided that maybe 60% of the role is the admin and 40% of the role is the financial responsibilities aspect. And here you can take two lines of data, one for admin, one for finance, and you can merge them proportionally to give yourself a market indicator. So you can see there how we'd go about that. I mean, this data's it's just illustrative data, by the way, but it just shows you of another technique that you can adopt. Another option would be to create, which is similar to blending, is to construct a panel of jobs. So here you identify jobs that are comparable to your job in different ways, and you're comparing your pay against a bucket of comparators. So in this example, we've got a front of house supervisor in a private medical clinic. So you can see there's several lines of data that builds up a picture of pay for broadly similar jobs, and then you can see both the individual lines, but if you take the median of the lines of data, that gives you the market indicator for the salary level for that position. The next step, once you've decided what jobs you're covering and who the comparators or job matches are going to be, what data do you need and where are you going to obtain it? So there's lots of things to think about here. So you need to think about, do you need the sector or sector specific data? Do you need location data? So sector specific surveys can be very useful providing granular data, but sometimes it is also useful to look at the broader salary data. So you might want to look for salary data for your specific sector, but in terms of recruitment and retention, employees might not necessarily be moving to and from jobs in the same sector. It might be more sensible to look at broader pay for private services, for example. National and regional data. So obviously national data gives you that broader overview, but if you're based in a higher paying region, so London and the Southeast, it's important to be looking at salary data that includes any additional allowances for that location. And some survey providers provide data only for national, some give national and London, and others do a full regional breakdown. So you need to think about what data you need beforehand. Some can do breakdowns for company size, and this tends to have much more relevance when benchmarking pay for managerial jobs, particularly senior and director level roles, and you can break that down either by employee numbers or turnover. Your pay elements is important. So do you just need basic pay? Basic pay is appropriate for most jobs, but shift is a significant element for a large number of roles. And the consolidation of shift pay in recent years means that comparisons for those sorts of jobs really should include both basic and shift. Variable pay tends to be less important when it comes to benchmarking, but again, it depends why you're doing the exercise and which jobs are being undertaken. It might be an important component if you're looking at managerial pay. On the sources of data, I think I'd just say that it's always recommended you use more than one source, which means you can validate the data by seeing if the same or similar results are reflected in different sources, because every source will have its strengths and limitations. You need to ask yourself why you're seeing differences, and it might be that perhaps the data needs to be time adjusted, or perhaps there's a larger proportion of bigger firms in there, so you need to apply an adjustment perhaps. Obviously, bear in mind that more specific you become with your requirements, the smaller the sample becomes. And in actual fact, sometimes you have data gaps. What can you do about that? One approach would be to apply an adjustment, and this is a kind of an illustration of that. So in a data source, you have data for an HR director, but you need HR director for central London. So what you can do is here go up a level to look at the salary survey and see what does it tell you about the typical difference between the national and central London rate. And then at the bottom, you can see you can then apply that to the HR specific data. So we've taken the median for the HR director, applied the adjustment, which gives us an indication that the market median in central London is 104,000. Another precise option is obviously to commission bespoke work or to establish a pay club that is obviously got time and cost implications. But this is a way you can share data within a very niche group, a closed group. The final step, and the most crucial one, is obviously to analyse and understand your market position. So where do you want to see yourself? Are you pitching yourself at the median of the market? Are you pitching yourself at the lower quartile or upper quartile of the market? You also need to think about, what are you comparing? Do you have a problem with recruitment? So are you looking at starting or minimum salaries and comparing how they sit versus the economy? Or are you looking at your anchor point, so where people typically progress, say, after a year or so? Or are you having retention issues and it's the maximum salaries that perhaps need to be looked at? The way we do the results is we typically say there's a kind of leeway of 10%. So if it's more than 10% above or below the market, that's an indication there's a significant issue there. Within that is broadly fine, because benchmarking is not a specific science. You need to understand why you're seeing the results that you are, and you need to look at both the quantitative results and any qualitative information you can get from line managers on insights as to why people perhaps are leaving or why they're not joining your business, and that can help you make informed decisions. And the very last point, because I don't want to keep Kanisha late, is that when you need to think about the actions that you're needed, you need to think about the impact that they might have. So while benchmarking to the external market is important, maintaining internal equities and fairness is also an important consideration. So you need to look at similar jobs or groups and decide, if you make a change to the salary range, what will be the knock-on impacts of there. And you need to be careful of making those decisions and think about the impact short, medium and long term. I'm going to end it there.